Right. Good morning, everybody. Okay, so we're finishing off chapter 10 in this lesson. We're trying to work 1 week per chapter, so this is going to be a pretty quick summary. So we've been looking at what's the difference between a manager and a leader, and also what's the difference between a good manager and a bad manager. Right. So in chapter 10 on page 126, we go through the five functions of a manager. Then we look at the roles, the three different roles that the manager plays: interpersonal roles, informational roles, and decision roles. In each section of role that they play for the employee as a figurehead, leader, and liaison under personal, interpersonal roles, it gives a description of the roles and an example. We then go into informational roles, monitor, disseminate, a spokesperson, and we've given examples in class as well, decisional roles, etc. So what's important to note, there's a difference between the role and the function of a manager. Also, we go into the different styles of managers, or shall I rather say leadership styles. We've covered autocratic, democratic, paternalistic, and laissez-faire. We've done a lot of detail in this in class, so catch up that on your own time. It seems to have frozen for some odd reason, but okay, that's why we've got the manual book. What we didn't go over in class is the different leadership businesses in leadership positions in business. So effectively you get director, manager, supervisor, and worker. That's on page 127. So different businesses have different positions available, and most workers kind of grow up through the ranks, or you study at university and then you apply for these positions. Okay, so looking on page 127, we go back there. So a director, they're normally senior managers. They're elected in office by the shareholders of the company, and they're usually head of a major functional department such as marketing, finance, etc. Their responsibility is delegating in the different departments to the different staff in the department. They meet and set certain objectives for the department, and they have pretty much a broad view of the business, and their sole focus is to measure, set objectives, and they don't actually do the work itself, but they're the ones that guide the different departments. Okay, the manager, however, is an individual responsible for the people. This is the focus of this chapter, the resources and decision makings. So once again, responsible for people and resources or decision making is normally a manager. They have some authority over staff below them in the hierarchy, and they direct, motivate, and if necessary, discipline. Supervisors, on the other hand, they're appointed by the managers to watch over the workers. Typically, it's a worker that's been there for a long time. They're usually not a decision-making role, and they have responsibility of leading like a team. So modern role of these members are less of an inspector and much more of a work colleague, and they're appointed to help the staff achieve their objectives, so like a team leader. Worker representatives, they are elected by the workers, such as trade union and officials, and they represent the council, etc. Okay, so then we went through the different styles, the drawbacks, the advantages, main features, and different applications, and where the democratic leader, etc. We've gone through all of this in class, so we're not going to go over that. But what we did focus a lot on was this key concept here. So there are different views of appropriate leadership styles for creating value in a business. Some managers believe that an autocratic style will encourage the workforce to work more effectively and create value. Other managers consider more of a laissez-faire, democratic style most appropriate to bring this best workforce to productivity or achieving the objectives. Okay, so what does that basically mean? Depending on what the opportunity is or the situation, that'll determine what the function of the style should be. So there's no such thing as a good manager or a bad manager, just the right and appropriate style at the time. Okay, so what we spoke about today in class was McGregor's theory X and theory Y. So what is that? Okay, there's this guy, his name's Douglas McGregor, and he studied just after the World War in the 1950s about the different attitudes of their managers to the workers. This is very key because it's the attitude of not the worker to the manager, but the manager to the worker. He identified two distinct approaches in the workforce and called them Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X managers, according to McGregor, view their workers as lazy, disliking work, and unprepared to take responsibility, and needing to be controlled and made to work. Clearly, this manager has to adopt a what kind of style? Autocratic style. On the other hand, McGregor believed that the managers who held Theory Y views believed that workers did not enjoy their work, and they found it as a they did enjoy their work, Theory Y, as a natural place of rest or play, and they're prepared to accept responsibility. They're creative and take on an active part in contributing ideas and solutions that work-related problems. So, if you've made up your own little table of Theory X and Theory Y, the difference is responsibility. Theory X doesn't want to take responsibility. Theory Y, they do want to take responsibility. Theory X is they are lazy and dislike working. Theory Y is they like to work and they find it fun. Theory Y, they're creative people and want to take on active role. Theory X, they need to be controlled in the workspace. So, a very important point to note about McGregor's work is this. He did not suggest that there were two types of workers, X and Y, but that the attitudes of the managers to workers could, in extreme cases, be described as these two theories. In practice, of course, most managers view somewhere between these two extremities, not one, but two. So if you had to plot a graph, X and Y, you could probably scientifically plot it and see which style you would take. Okay, so there it is. There's a little table for you for summary. Theory X believes that the workers dislike work, avoid responsibility, and are not creative, and need to be controlled. Theory Y believe that they derive much enjoyment from the work, they accept responsibility, and are creative, and work is fun. Okay, straightforward. Don't need to go into too much depth there. The best leadership style, however, depends on 4 factors. A little bit later in the chapter, we'll see exactly what those 4 factors are, but as a type of an introduction, the training and experience of a workforce. Okay, let's just slow it down a bit. So, why would you adopt a Theory X or a Theory Y attitude towards your worker? Well, it'll depend on a few things. These factors would be the theory you would adopt depends on the training of the workforce. So, we had an example about let's say your dad owns a very, very expensive car, and now this very expensive car just comes brand new off the floor, and you skip the service, the first interval service of 15,000 kilometers. What'll happen? If the car or the engine blows up or something goes wrong on the car, it's the owner's responsibility, and nobody else will pay for that repair. It's the owner has to pay for the repair. However, if the workshop that it went to and the father did take the car in for the service, and the worker that was on the workforce that did the actual labor, that serviced the car, and forgot to tighten the wheel nuts properly, and the wheel falls off, or didn't use the right oil, or forgot to put the sump plug back, or did something really silly, guess what would have happened? The worker would be responsible, that's correct, but also the workshop manager would be responsible, and the workshop and that whole company would be liable for any of the damages. However, if it's proven that the workshop did their job, the customer did their job, and there was a factory fault, then the car would go to the factory and the investigation would then release the customer a new car. So, if you were the workshop manager and you had an apprentice that was working on the workshop and you weren't controlling him tightly, the workshop manager would be liable, correct? So, the degree of responsibility would lie very much in that case, the workshop manager, because he didn't closely manage his staff. Okay, does that make sense? So he would have had to have taken a different approach, a Theory X approach, an autocratic approach, a lot of structure, a lot of feedback, etc. And if you didn't do that, well, there's going to be a price to pay. Now, the amount of time available for consultation and participation is also an important factor. The attitude of the managers and the managers' culture would also play a factor. And I mean, if somebody is naturally a very lazy person, they wouldn't adopt a theory X approach themselves. People that are very pedantic would have done that. The importance of issue under consideration would be the styles be used in the same business in different situations. So it would be dependent on the risk. There we go, very clearly risk. Okay, another thing that we did cover today, and it's very important to highlight this, is that in the past, leaders were not exposed to as much information, neither were workers. So there were poor communities, there were post-war, there wasn't enough resources available, access to information wasn't there. So there was a lot of things that were not available like we have today. So autocratic style was kind of the way that things ran. So you had a manager who was educated, he typically had some sort of influence, maybe a family, and they were appointed according to their culture, their family lines, etc., like I said. So bottom line is now today, with the access of information so freely available to everybody, most people have got some sort of education. In those days, you'd have up to grade 7, standard 6, and so forth, and you went to work. And some kids actually went to work when they were still in primary school. So times have changed. There's lots of factors that have adopted this. So you'll see a lot more of a democratic style of workers or managers towards workers. Very important. What's an informal leader? An informal leader is somebody that is respected amongst their peers and has influence without actually being elected in the business. So sometimes at a school or a college, the people find this charismatic natural leader and they respect him and they or her, and they allow them to lead the way, and they get appointed by society or the colleagues. So the key term is a person that has no formal authority but has the respect of the colleagues and some sort of power or influence over them, motivating them. Okay, you can read that chapter further. Okay, very important key note here. This is going to is definitely in your exams. Emotional intelligence or emotional quotient or emotional factor. In this book we talk about emotional intelligence. So EI, it is the ability to understand yourself, your goals, your behaviors, and your responses to people, understanding others and their feelings. We dealt with this in a little bit more depth in the class. The ability of managers to understand their own emotions, those of people that they work with, and they achieve better performance through that. So, how do you break it down into 4 factors? This guy, Daniel Goleman, okay, did a lot of research on EI, and he came up with 4 main EI concepts that managers should try to develop in order to get growth, productivity, and profit out of a business. So they are self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills. So self-awareness kind of comes down to knowing how you feel. That's quite important to guide your decision making. Some people, they buy a car, for example, just on how they feel. And they don't like the color blue, but they like the color red, so that's why they buy a red car. No, that's not it. So knowing how you feel, being, okay, you sit in the car, it feels good, you like the smell of the leather, or you don't like the smell of the leather, you like the smell of cloth. But you also go through the process of going, okay, well, it's a manual car, I'm quite comfortable driving a manual car or not, and say, okay, well, I know I don't do well with manual shifts, I like an automatic car. But having the ability, knowing your own abilities and having the self-confidence in your own abilities, that's self-awareness. Self-management, on the other hand, is whether you're able to recover quickly from stress. So in the class, I shouted at everybody and I said, what are you doing? Sit up straight. And guess what happened? Everybody got a fright. Now, some people would react in a negative way and they'd shout back, or they'd leave the classroom, or they'd burst out into tears. So how would you handle a situation like that if somebody's always shouting at you? One of the children said, or one of the people in the class said, what happens when you desensitize to that? You come from a home where there's a lot of shouting all the time. Shouting doesn't have an effect on you. Yes, true, but you might have a different type of situation where, let's say, you're in a car accident. Do you have the ability to bounce back from that? Trustworthy and conscientious. We're talking about, okay, do you litter? Nobody's looking, but you throw paper on the ground, or you throw your bottle out of the window, or whatever. And who's watching? Nobody. So does that make you trustworthy? No. But does that make you conscientious? Definitely not. So were you ever in a situation where you had to tell somebody that they don't look well, or they look fat, or they look ugly, or they don't dress well, but you know that, but you don't want to tell them that because it might hurt their feelings? But isn't that being not trustworthy? Because if you were trustworthy as a friend, you would tell them, wouldn't you? Something like that. Yeah. Okay, so, and once again, self-control. I mean, if you go out into public looking like a sloth, you got no self-control over the way you look and you dress. You go to a party was the one idea. We said, okay, who likes sweet things? Who likes savory things? And if you go to a social gathering and there's only a small plate and you really, really like olives, for example, and you can't control yourself and you finish all the olives and nobody else gets a chance, there's no self-control. So self-management is about managing yourself and your own consciousness and your own ability to be trustworthy. Social awareness is how you see others, how you sense how they're feeling. If you can see somebody's about to burst out into tears and cry, are you going to push them further to that point of breaking, or are you going to just put your arms around them and give them a hug? So it's a bit of both self-management and social awareness. Okay, so it's also taking the other views of the other people into account. So especially at school, there's lots of different views. People have a lot of things to say about the past apartheid, for example. And just because you have an Afrikaans surname, they would call you a boer. And they would do that just to instigate a response from you, or is it because they heard from the apartheid, or they are trying to draw you out into a debate? So being able to sense what the other people are doing and what they're trying to achieve. Social skills, handling emotions in relationships well, accurately understanding different social situations, and use those skills to persuade and negotiate the lead. So for example, we had this debate around, okay, let's say you forgot to pay your water and lights, and now you go to the council and you say, okay, well, I'd like my water to be put on. I'm sorry I missed the deadline. Please, I'll pay the fees and the penalties. I really need my lights on. I'll wash in the swimming pool if I have to, but I really need my electricity on. Please switch it on and be very kind. Or do you go there and say, hey, you cut off my electricity. Why did you do that? Now, please put it on. Not even please. You have no right to do that. I've been paying and I've been a customer for so many years, and how dare you do that? What kind of a person are you? And so forth. Now, which one's going to elicit the right response? So that's all about social skills. So, imagining working for managers with emotional intelligence. If somebody has good project management skills, but they got no social intelligence, a manager would not be able to achieve managing that project to the degree that they need to achieve the end results. So such managers attempt projects beyond their abilities, but self-confidence the targets would be met because they've got emotional intelligence, but they don't have this is not right. So, can you imagine working for a manager without these emotional intelligence, or with very low levels of them? Such a manager would attempt projects beyond their abilities, but lack self-confidence that targets would be met, lack the trust and confidence of others so that There'd be so much stress and be difficult to approach. Fail to take the views of others into account when making decisions. Perform poorly in social situations, finding it difficult to talk and negotiate with others, and lacking the ability to build a team. It would not be fun working with them, would it? But it's important to note that certain will lead to low levels of motivation, achievement, and performance. They would in brief be poor managers and poor leaders. Okay, then basically for homework, here's a summary. Let's just quickly run through it. Summary points. Managers perform many important functions within the business. Key term there is functions. Leaders is not necessarily the same as managers. Most effective leaders are particularly have good personal qualities, and there are significant differences between main leadership styles. The most appropriate leadership style depends on many factors such as the type of business or organization, the experience of the manager, the task being undertaken, and the attitude of the manager towards the workforce. McGregor's theory X and Y is an attempt to classify the extreme views that can be held by managers about their workers. These views will be a great influence on the style of management adopted. Formal leaders are those appointed by more senior managers. Informal leaders are those that have good deal of influence on work groups. There are 4 key competencies used to assess emotional intelligence. What are they again? Self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, social skills. Okay, just before we go into what the homework is, I just want to tell you a story. I went to a place in Knysna yesterday, and I met a guy there who was running a fish and chip shop, and he on the back of his wall, had this what looked like a shark tooth hanging down there with a lot of edged insignia in it. And I said, wow, what a beautiful shark tooth. He said, no, it's not a shark tooth. I said, what do you mean it's not a shark tooth? He said, no, it's a bone, a camel bone. I said, what? Wow, camel bone. With so much detail in it. He said, yeah, come, I'll show you. And he took it off, took it off the wall, and then gave it to me, and I felt it, and it was beautiful. I should have taken a picture for you guys. But the story is this. His friend was on the Nile River, and he was busy. He was on the boat, obviously, on the Nile River, and this boy swam across from the shore with a backpack on, and when he got there, he was trying to sell just one for $1. One little bone etched with this insignia. Beautiful, really looked like a shark tooth. And he said no, she had emotional intelligence. She asked how much for the bag, and obviously she bought the whole bag. When she arrived back here in South Africa, she gave it to all her friends and family. But who had the emotional intelligence there, the boy or the person buying it? Probably both, because what happened with the boy after he'd sold his whole bag, he probably could eat for another week or so and realized, hang on, I have a mission, I have a skill, I have a market. This is awesome. Let me go and make more of these, and perhaps I can convince more people to buy in bulk. But the story was, out of the desert, out of nothingness, out of death, here comes this little boy, takes bones, dead bones, camel bones, and makes this beautiful product and sells them, and has the ability to convince other people. So he had that social ability, he had his own self-management ability, his self-awareness of his own skills. So his intelligence level was pretty high, I'd guess. So yeah, it just shows you, quite amazing story. Alright, so for homework, you've just got to go through these these 2 discussions here, and then answer the questions 1 to 4 on this page and 1 to 4 on this page. And then that's it. Arrivederci. Thanks for watching.